Hey guys, this is going to be a different video compared to what I normally work on. I know that a lot of people are used to seeing gaming clips, long plays, photo compilations, things like that, but I was going to do something different for this line of videos. So it's been, for the last week or so, it's been Abuse Awareness Week, and like it comes around every year. A lot of my friends have been wanting me to make an entry. They normally go off and they talk about their abuse and make 30-minute videos and raise awareness and stuff, but for the last while I've actually had cold feet because for me, it was a very traumatic thing. And I finally feel that I've advanced enough in my mental health that I can confidently sit down and talk about this. I know that it's been overdue for a while, and my friend Jason finally sat down and he's like, Rame, honey, you got to go and do this. You got to work on it. And so I said to myself, all right, maybe now's the time. So I have a very extensive history of abuse, and so I'm not going to go through my entire life. I'm just going to focus on the last relationship that I had to a person that I was engaged to, and it's going to cover quite a bit. So, there's probably most likely going to be two videos to this series. There's going to be a couple of different releases. The chunks are going to be released independently, and then there's going to be like a giant master edit where it's literally from start to finish. It's probably going to be clocking in at around, I want to say, maybe 4.5 hours. So I'm a very private human being. I don't really like to talk about my life that much. It's not something that I really enjoy. I definitely have a lot of closeted stuff, and it's been like that for as long as I can remember. So when people ask me to talk about the abuse, I do get the occasional comment about it on YouTube, because in some of my commentaries, I do talk about the abuse a fair bit, and so people have been asking about it. So a while back I'd written a paper about it. I still have that paper on stack, but the thing is sometimes people just want something to listen to or to learn something while they go and do things. So I've decided, all these years later, for Abuse Awareness Week, to actually go do a commentary about it, talk about what happened, how it impacted me, things like that. This video is going to be my oral history of what happened, and then the next video is going to be nothing but commentary about the evidence that was collected, exhibiting like her various behaviors, explaining what certain things are, things like that, so people can get an idea what I and everybody else had to go and deal with. So let's go ahead and begin, shall we? I started naming. I had started dating a woman named Alexa Stahl way back in the beginning of 2016. I had been out of the dating pool for quite some time. I had lost my first wife, my child, and I just didn't want to date for a bit. A lot of my friends were heavily suggesting that I get back out there and I start dating again, and so I had met her in a streamer named Agnes Singe. His chat and stuff, we both watched his content fairly regularly because he was a pretty cool dude and stuff. And we would go and we would talk in Twitch chat a fair bit. And so when Dark Souls had released, well, Dark Souls 3 had released, I had popped into her stream, and with me being very PvP centric, I had challenged her to go and fight in PvP. And then when she had lost, I had offered to teach her how to PvP. So we had started spending a fair bit of time together. She used to hang out with this other bloke at the time named Zero Gravity, and he was one of her friends for a while. I don't know if they still hang out, but they were kind of attached to the hip for a bit, claimed to be best friends, all that stuff. So after I had hung out with her enough, everything was kind of jiving really well, and I asked her, I said, hey, do you want to date? She was way the hell up in Canada. I was living in Arizona, and so she eventually had said yes, and we had started dating. The rest of the year, for the most part, was relatively normal, about as normal as it could be. I found that the relationship moved a little bit fast. Um, she was very quick to say I love you and, we're soulmates and everything else. I had a fully loaded Twitter account at the time, and she would go and like every single tweet I had, and it would be like, I love the heck out of you and all this stuff. We had learned a fair bit about each other. We both told each other about our trauma and stuff and where we had come from and everything like that. Um, it's kind of like, thinking back on it now is kind of surreal with how fast everything was moving, because with me, relationships develop really slowly, but they're very rock solid. Like, all of my friends, I've had them for well over 25 years at this point. And so we sat down, we talked about each other's trauma and stuff. She had told me that she survived a string of abuse, and at the time I believed it. She was telling me that her last boyfriend apparently was going and serving 25 years for being a trafficker and then trying to sell her to another trafficker. And I was like, that's really awful. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. You're not going to have to worry about that with me. And so she had also stated at the time that she wasn't working because she was recovering from leukemia, and Canada was giving her payments to pay her bills and stuff. She was on some form of disability to go and pay her bills while she recovered, and that she was coming out of it and recovering and everything else. So I said to myself, that's pretty cool. We were both music nerds. She claimed at the time that she was playing music for like a lot of bands, and I have my own band and stuff. It's not a large band or anything. We're definitely local. We go around a fair bit and, play shows and stuff, but we're not, what I would deem as famous. So I kind of made up my mind early on. I said, yeah, I want to stay with this one because I like somebody that has a similar background to mine. It makes it very easy to relate, and we should get along pretty famously. We're both dog lovers, everything was just really good. So the first year more or less came and went. We spent the holidays very quietly. Both of us were kind of hesitant to talk about the relationship and stuff. All of our friends knew. She had claimed that she had no family and stuff, that her mom and her dad were both dead. And my mom and my dad, with my relationships, I have a tendency to keep it quiet because I just like to do my relationships myself. I don't really like to involve my family too much, because then if something happens, it doesn't just hurt me, it also hurts them, and I just really don't want that. So we had spent the holidays kind of quietly, and moving into 2017, tragedy had struck for the first time. She was having a hard time getting work because apparently nobody wanted to hire her for being trans. She was claiming at the time that she's like a licensed electrician and stuff, that she was a journeyman. And I said, oh, okay, well, it shouldn't be that hard to go and find work. They were getting ready to go and stop her payments pretty soon because she was well enough to work. She had recovered enough, and so she had to go and find a job pretty soon while the payments were still rolling in, to ease the transition from being on disability over to being gainfully employed and stuff. Tragedy had struck when her dog had gotten really sick. At the time, I was on a fixed income and stuff because my body was falling apart. And they didn't really know why. I was still in the process of investigating it. They just knew that I had like tons of inflammation and my body just wasn't really doing well. So I had a fixed income and like a small savings that I had set to the side for myself. She had come home one day, told me she found her dog on the ground. She had a little tiny teddy bear chihuahua named Toby, and she was telling me that there was something wrong with like the dog's mouth and she had to take it to the vet. I said, okay, not a problem. She took the dog to the vet, and apparently the dog had developed an abscess because the dog had really bad dental issues from eating wet food and human food all the time. So they wanted to go and charge her $2,000 at the time, I believe. And so she was like, I can't pay this, I have like all these bills and stuff, and I'm still paying all my mortgage, because she was trying to be a home buyer at the time. And so I had leaned in, we had been together a good bit, and I said, tell you what, I got some money set to the side. Go ahead, find a company that'll go and allow you to make payments, and I'll go ahead and make the payments on it. nobody should ever have to be without their best friend. I had a giant black lab and German Shepherd myself named Ladybug, and at the time I couldn't really imagine life without her, even though she was kind of climbing up there. And so she agreed. She got really excited, told me that she loved me, and I had started making payments on the dog's medical bills, more or less. And so the first half of 2017 was okay for the most part. We had gamed together pretty regularly. She continued looking for work, and work just wasn't really happening because it was a down economy. Canada was getting hit worse than most, especially the services industry and stuff. And so she was kind of struggling with it a fair bit. I had decided to take up casting again on Twitch. And so I had started casting pretty regularly. I was going and doing games like Dark Souls and Killing Floor, and just like all these games that I just enjoyed playing. A lot of Doom, a lot of Quake, just titles that I immensely enjoy. Naturally, she became my moderator, my editor. And so I had introduced her to my friends. My friends were completely cool with her at the time. They were like, hey, we're happy that you're happy, hon. And I was like, thanks, guys. We're both trans. She's a trans woman, and I'm an intersex woman that at the time hadn't started transitioning over yet. And my friends just wanted to see me happy. They felt that both of us being trans gave us some common ground and stuff. And so we would spend our days going. She would get up early in the morning, fill out her paperwork for her payments to continue. And then we would typically go and spend the afternoons and evenings playing Xbox and stuff. I normally had pretty loaded mornings with my medical life. It was keeping me relatively busy at the time. So I had started streaming to pass the time and stuff. Literally, I met a bunch of cool people on Twitch, and I started to get to know her friends a little bit. She was rolling with a bunch of streamers at the time, and her life kind of revolved around them a fair bit. So I had met Gravy, well, Zero Gravity. Everybody called him Gravy at the time. Very early on, he seemed like a cool dude, really shy. I could tell that he had like self-esteem issues and stuff, but he seemed like a genuinely good dude. And I was very proud to know him for a while. She used to hang out with another gentleman named Ghost Dog 2 from the UK. And he was a cool dude too, but he was like a little bit rough around the edges. I still enjoyed his company for a while until we wound up going our separate ways. She used to hang out with this other guy named Zilla7478. We didn't really mesh well together. The first time that I had met him and stuff, he was completely hammered off his ass. And he was bragging about all the hell that he had raised with his parents when he was younger, back when he was like living in New York and stuff, and bragging about drug and alcohol use and everything else. And I would question her about it because it just seemed like an oddball thing to really be proud of, and she'd be like, well, that's just Zilla being Zilla, and don't think about it too much. So I had him on my friends list, but I wouldn't really like reach out to him. Like, he was mainly there to show her that like I approved of them hanging out and stuff, but I myself didn't hang out with him. He didn't, as far as I could tell, most of the people that I saw him hanging out with, he didn't really keep good company. Most of the time they were all fucked up on drugs and shit, so I just kind of had a tendency to stay away. And so these are the people that she would primarily gravitate around. She had another friend, if you could call him that, named Zindane91, and like he was okay and stuff, and he wound up being super sleazy later, but we're going to go ahead and get into that later on down the line of this video. So I met her friends, and they all seemed like very quirky and stuff and slightly strange. A lot of the friends that she had were either fucked up on drugs or they would drink heavily. She only had two friends that I was aware of that didn't do this, and that was Sidecar Angel, who she used to mod for, and then Queen Homicida, who she also used to mod for as well. Both of them were mid-tier streamers that were kind of in their prime back then. So she would get on Xbox and then go ahead and pop on Twitch, and she would moderate for them and stuff. And I was like, it's good to have hobbies. It's glad to see that she's helping out people and stuff. And everything was okay. Things had kind of kept progressing for a while, and the middle of 2017 had hit, and things had gotten kind of strange. We were sitting down one night, and I was casting. She was in the stream with me, lending her voice to the stream. We were both playing games at the time, and she had freaked out, said that she had hated me. and that she wanted to kill me and my family. And I was like, what the fuck? I thought it was a joke at first because I joke like that with my friends. Like, my friends and I all have really fucking crazy ass dark humors to us. And so I was like, that's kind of strange, you know, and I just kind of. My moderator at the time was worried about it, so he had saved the VOD. And he had questioned me about it. He goes, you know, what is this? And I said, I have no idea. So I went to bed that night. He had saved the VOD. The following morning, I had gotten up. I had messaged her, said that I needed to speak to her, essentially. And I was like, you know, what is this? And I asked her about it. She said that it had never happened and that she didn't know what I was talking about. Well, she was drinking the night before. I thought that she was just blackout drunk. I said that I had the video for it and that I wanted to show it to her. She had freaked out a little bit and said, no, no, that's fine, and that it wouldn't happen again. So I said, okay. I held her, I kept her on as a mod. And I was like, okay, guys, it was just a one off event. You know, probably drinking a little bit too much. It gets a little wild and crazy. That's fine. The year continued, and things had started to tighten up a bit. The chats were getting kind of strange. I would go and I would talk about musical projects I was working on, and I would share my material with her. And she would be like, you know, I can do better vocals than this. And, you know, the thing is I'm the vocalist for my band. And I do like really guttural growls. Like, I just sound really heavy, you know, like even with vocal training to be a little bit more femme, I still sound very heavy. And so she would sit there and say that she could go take all my music, add better vocals to it. And I said, hon, these songs are already set in stone. If you want to go and do like a cover or something, you know, if you want to go and record fresh material with me, that's fine. I'd love to do it, you know. And she wasn't satisfied with it for whatever reason. She's like, no, 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 I could just go and do the vocals on these tracks and then we can re-release them. And my band wasn't comfortable with that. They were like, you know, these songs are fine, right? There's no reason for this. Why doesn't she just do a cover with slightly different stylings and instrumentals, and then she can redo the vocals? And she wasn't really, again, satisfied with this. So I told her, I said, you know, that's fine, hon. You know, we won't even worry about it. We can just make fresh material together. And I had started sending her less and less material that I was working on. My band was already getting ready to disband at the time because we all wanted to work on separate projects, but we wanted to bang out one last really good release before we went our separate ways. We all still know each other, it's just we're all working on different things. And so I wasn't really too enthused about this. She would go and randomly disappear sometimes during the night as well. She would never really explain where she was going. She would just up and disappear. No, be right back. No, hey, I'm handling this. She would just be up and gone. So she would disappear for a couple hours at a time. I would still be left in the chat waiting for her to come back. And after a while, this had started to annoy me because it just feels really rude to start a chat with somebody and then just randomly disappear. So I had sat there for a while and I was talking. I had accepted a phone call and I leave my mic open for everything, and I was going and I was talking to one of my close friends about it. I said, yeah, I'm not really feeling this. I'm not really sure, you know, what the hell's going on, more or less. And so she had come back, she had thrown a temper tantrum. She was like, don't you love me? And I was like, well, yeah, hon, I do, but you're leaving for hours at a time. You're not even saying that you're leaving. I don't care where you go or what you do, you know. This is just a little bit weird for me because normally when I'm in a chat and anybody from my friends group or even like past love interests have had to go anywhere, they're like, hey, I'll be right back, I'm handling stuff. And so the rest of us are like, all right, man, we'll see you when you get back, it's not a problem. So she would randomly disappear and she would come back and it'd be like really weird kind of explanations. She's like, oh, my friend needed me. And it's like, okay, well, your friend needed you for what? And if I would ask her, I would never really get an answer. So after a while, I just kind of eyeballed it and I said, okay, yeah, she's doing whatever. And so eventually she would start to give me answers like, oh, my friend needed me to go pick them up, or my friend needed me to go and help them with this, or my friend's going to be crashing at my house because they're in an abusive relationship and they need a place to go. And I said, you know what, that's fine. It's good to help people. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be going and sweating it too much, more or less. So for a while, this was kind of the status quo. Eventually, the funds that she was receiving had started to run out, and it was putting pressure on her. And so, without funds, she wasn't able to pay for the internet. She wasn't really able to go and make house payments. So I had transitioned over from paying for the dog's surgery to being like, okay, we're going to go ahead and cover your food bill, help with the internet, things like that. And I would typically send it over via digital transfer over PayPal. And so everything was fine for a little bit. Well, about as fine as it could be. A couple of months rolled by, and everything was just kind of going and doing its thing. We had started arguing a little bit because she was constantly out of food. I was giving her more than enough to go and get food, but she was constantly out of food for some reason. And I would ask her why. I said, "Hun, this is more than enough to go and get food." "Well, I had to go and give some food to my friend, and this person, that person. I'm trying to help people." And I said, "Hun, you got to worry about food for yourself." And so she would go and get angry, and she would kind of snap at me. She goes, "Well, some of us like taking care of people." And I take care of people all the time. It's not entirely unusual and stuff. And so I just kind of said, "Hon, you got to worry about yourself before you can go and take care of others. That's kind of how that works." And so this would breed tension for a while. She would go get money, spend it on people that she shouldn't really be helping because she's not really in any position to do so. And while it's good to have a big heart, in order to go and give to other people, you have to be able to sustain yourself first. You can't run yourself into the ground, right? To go and take care of them. So this became a point of tension. She had started drinking a fair bit. She didn't drink when we had gotten together. It was something that kind of spawned out of the blue. And then she had started making claims that she was like beat up and all this other stuff, and that she was raped. I lost count of how many times she said that she was sexually assaulted. It was a pretty regular occurrence. It would normally happen I want to say like every month to every month and a half. And it was really pissing me off. At the time, I would frequently ask, what's being done about this? Who's investigating this? I would ask all these questions because with sexual assault, I get pissed with it. I get pissed when it happens to others. I wasn't okay when it happened to me. So when I hear about things like this, because this person's with me, I get mad. Even if she wasn't with me at the time, I would have still been pissed because this shit is awful. So she would make interesting claims like, I was raped on the sidewalk by 5 men and I was unconscious for all of it. And it was just really weird because I was like, okay, you're claiming that you're walking down the sidewalk and you get sexually assaulted by like 5 men and you were unconscious for all of it. And it's like, okay, well, you say that you never went to the police. If you're unconscious, how did you know how many men were there? And if you're in like a public sidewalk just walking down, wouldn't somebody, ever step in to go and do something? Like, I don't know about you, but if that shit happened in my town, people would be all over them. That shit would not be happening. And then there was another time she had told me a story where apparently she was in her backyard and 3 men had jumped the fence and raped her. And so I had asked her at the time, I was like, did you go to the police? And she's like, no, I don't. No, I didn't. I can't trust them. And I'm just sitting there going, "Hun, they need to run a kit on you. If you don't go to the police, at least go to the hospital so they can run a kit on you and we can put the bastards behind bars." Nothing ever came of this. I was pretty confused by it because when it had happened to me, I literally had no choice in the matter. I was literally over at a hospital and they were taking samples. That's just kind of how that is, But with her, it's like no hospital, no police, just the claim. So this would go on for a while. She would ask me if I believed her and stuff. And in the back of my mind, I was like, something's kind of wrong here. But since I'm with them, it's like, you're trying to reassure them. So it's like, okay, hon, yeah, I believe you. And so it would keep the peace for a bit, but this would go on for a while. She would say that somebody beat her up in a parking lot, and that she had cracked and broken bones, and that she was like heavily bruised up and stuff, and it was just really strange. So I'd be like, mail me a picture of you, please. And so she would mail me like a photo of her with like her bruised face, and she'd be crying and stuff. But the thing is like the photos would always be like unnaturally dark. And so I would eventually be like, hey, can I have a well lit photo? And I know that this probably comes off as being kind of rude, but I've seen people fake sexual assault so much that I've just learned to ask for well lit photos because I want to see what it is I'm working with, more or less. And so I went and I asked her, and they never materialized. She would also say that she had like cracked and broken bones, and I would ask her if she got casts, and she'd be like, "Oh no, I didn't go to the hospital. I just came home." You came home with broken bones, really? So this would become a point of tension throughout all of 2017. She had started to lose her home. She decided that she was going to sell the home and then go ahead and live off of whatever the hell it was that she was going to get out of it, because when she sold the home, she would have to go pay off the rest of the bank because she was still making payments on it, and then whatever the hell was left, she would be able to walk with. So that was the game plan for a while. She was constantly out of food. The internet was constantly up, constantly down. Finally, she had disappeared for 3 months. And this had freaked me out. My anxiety was already like really high because she was constantly claiming sexual assault. She was constantly claiming that she was beat up and out of food, and after a while, it was literally driving me to drink, more or less. Like, I actually had to recover from alcoholism after this. And so it was really fucked up because she was making all these claims, and it was hiking my anxiety so high to a point where if I didn't hear from her, I would freak out. I wouldn't freak out and be mad with it. I would be freaking out because I didn't know if she was okay. And when I care about somebody, I wonder these things. I worry about these things. And so my behavior had eventually started to go straight to hell. I never knew she was okay, so she would like disappear for extended periods. I would call, it would say the number was disconnected. And then sometimes if she didn't show up when she said she was going to show up, I'd kind of freak out and think she either got raped or beat up or murdered, So I would go and I would call her phone and I'd be like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Eventually, this narrative would pop up that I was trying to control her, but the lack of feedback on her side of things was so goddamn heavy that she would never really have an answer for anything. And so I eventually got to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was arguing with her kind of a little bit roughly. I said, "Hun, I can't do this." So she had sent me a text message stating that she loved me and that she would see me amongst the stars. And I saw that and I was like, this is a thinly veiled suicide note. I had called the RCMP because she had tried to kill herself. She had chugged a bunch of pills. And I said to myself, this is not okay. I realized at this point that she had mental health issues. I didn't know what. My anxiety was really far out of hand. I was like shaking all the time. My health was starting to go to hell. And so she had spent a month in the ward, and they had concluded that she came back with a bunch of paperwork, and we were staring at it via Skype at the time, and she was like, "Oh, well, I got diagnosed," and she would go and send me pics of her paperwork, and I would take note of the medical codes attached to the forms. So she told me she was diagnosed with nothing but BPD. When I looked at the medical forms, they said BPD, anxiety, and then NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. So I said, "Oh, you have NPD," and she goes, "Yeah, but it's fine. It doesn't impact much." And so I was just kind of sitting there. I didn't really know about narcissism that much at the time, and so this was kind of a pivotal point in the relationship because from this point forward, she would go and use this as a weapon against me. And so what had happened was the entire time she was in the ward, I would call the staff and I'd be like, "How is she doing?" And the staff would be like, "Oh, she's doing fine. Would you like us to let her know that you called. And I said, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I would send her flowers and stuff because I just, they wouldn't let her have the vase because, you know, sharp glass object, but they would let her have the flowers. And, you know, I wanted her to feel like she was being taken care of. To have mental illness is really fucking awful. To have no support while having mental illness is worse. So I went to, shit hit the fan. She said that she was going to kill herself, and so I had called the RCMP again. And she went ahead and she wound up going into the ward again. She was in there for a week this time, and, you know, her anxiety was really bad. And she wound up leaving early because she had to go and handle life, more or less, you know. Like, her housing situation was collapsing, all the food was collapsing, just everything was looking really, really fucking awful. So I went to go and send flowers. The flower delivery company had called me. They're like, there's nobody here by that name. So I was like, huh, that's odd. Are you sure? She should still be there. She eventually cropped back up a week later. And I had asked her, I said, well, yeah, hon, I went to send you some flowers. And they said that you weren't there. And she was like, oh, well, they wanted to make sure that I could survive over a week by myself and all this other stuff. And so there was like no communication on her being out at all. Like, whenever I would go and get out of something medically, I'd be like, baby, I'm doing fine, I'm out, everything's great. So I found this to be really, really weird. I had talked amongst my friends for a while, and I still had a lot of her friends on my friends list at the time. And a lot of them had started to be assholes about shit. Like, if I wanted to talk to Zilla about anything, no, I can't do it right now, or, you know, I don't have time for this, and like all this other shit. I had tried to talk to Eugene about it, and he was, you know, always busy, or sometimes he just wouldn't reply. Just the reliability of these people was non-existent. You know, it just didn't exist with them. And so the end of the year had started rolling around, and she had disappeared for 2 weeks, saying that she was handling somebody's death. That she had to leave town in her truck and go and handle somebody's death, and they were super close, and all this other stuff. So I said, alright, dude, whatever. And I had noticed at the time, so she wasn't, like, I found that she would lie a lot about things. Like, she would constantly say, I'm not on Xbox, but she would actually forget that she was appearing online. And then with me at the time, my Xbox was online 24/7. Everybody could see what the hell it was I was doing. Most of the time, I would literally either be sitting on the main menu of a game, or I would be going and sitting on the home screen, or Netflix. Like, you know, those are pretty much the three main things that you would literally see my Xbox be doing. So I would see her Xbox log in over this period, and it would be playing a ton of games and stuff. She didn't have, like, any sort of roommate that I was aware of. And so it had literally gone from bad to worse, you know, and I thought it was weird, so I would call her. And she snapped back, and she was like, I'm trying to live my life, and I'm trying to handle things, and, like, she would come at me with this torrent of anger because I would be like, hon, if you're handling somebody's death, you know, why are you taking the Xbox with you if you're going to be going and dealing with people 24/7? They were good questions to ask, I think. And so she was like, I'll be home soon, stop being so controlling, and she would hang up. So she eventually came back home, and at this point I was just kind of like, yeah, this is what it is, and I wasn't really too enthused. Her friends had never come through for me at all. I had kept casting, and at the time I had moderated one of her friends, and I found that he was literally going and trying to steal from the stream, and he was trying to scout from the stream as well while he was trying to go and cast. I sent him packing. It wasn't really that great, you know, like, he was not a good dude at all. And so she would sit there and she'd be like, well, don't you trust my friends? And I had gotten to a point where it was a solid resounding no. I said, no, I don't trust them. Most of the time they're fucked up on drugs or alcohol. One of them just tried to fucking steal from me. These are not good people. And she just kind of sat there and she goes, well, you need to trust them. I can't. The holidays kind of more or less came and went. It was the first holiday that we were public together. And so we were going and video chatting over the internet. We spent Christmas together. Everything was fine. Halloween was great. Around this time, she had started to adopt roommates. She had gotten paid, and so she was looking for the bank officially had full ownership of her home, and she was looking for a new place to go and live. And while she was looking to go and live somewhere else, she had adopted roommates to literally go and pay her bills, more or less. So the first roommate that she had, shit was kind of a mess. They would pop into my cast and stuff, and on Twitter it was really weird because they were kind of following each other, and it looked like they were kind of hitting on each other a fair bit, which was very weird. I would occasionally go and look at the messages and shit, and it was really weird because this child was barely legal, and then Annie was like well into her 30s at this point, and I thought that that was kind of strange. So the child had popped into my cast one night and said, "She's fucking crazy. I can't live here. I gotta go. She's throwing plates at me and screaming at me and all this other stuff." So I had messaged her back via Whispers, and I said, "Tell you what, not a problem." I said, "I'm sorry it didn't work out. I'll ask her about it later. I'm sorry that that happened to you." I had talked to Annie about it. She said that her roommate was psychotic and that she had trashed the house and that she was in the process of cleaning up the house and getting it ready for another roommate. And I was like, all right, I'm sorry that it happened. Let's go ahead and push through it. Another roommate had shown up at the time, and it was a male, I believe. And he was going and working in the trades. And so he was showing up at weird hours, going to sleep, and then just listening to music. And he was very inconsistent with his rent. And so she would go and she would rage about it and stuff. I would sit in parties, and I would just kind of, in many ways, endlessly listen to her dump on this guy every chance that she had gotten. And eventually he just got up and left. He didn't want to deal with it. Another young woman had become her roommate, and we were celebrating our anniversary at the time. The new year had rolled around, more or less, and we were going ahead and celebrating our anniversary. She had shown up completely drunk with her roommate. Her roommate had passed out and vomited on the couch, and I was literally sitting on the other end of the video chat just kind of waiting for our evening to start and stuff. And so she would kind of giggle and be like, "I'll be right back." And I kind of sat there for 4 hours and did nothing while she went and catered to this vomiting child. And then she eventually came back, sat on the couch, and passed out from alcohol. So at this point, I was kind of like, this isn't getting any better. She had literally become combative at this point and argued to me about everything, saying that I didn't understand what she was going through and that she was about to be homeless and had no food. And around this time, she would go and weaponize Twitter a fair bit to attack pretty much anybody and everybody. And it wasn't really getting that much better. I had come up close to stopping casting at this point because she would go throw temper tantrums and then give me the silent treatment for like a couple of weeks, and it was just really fucking abusive. In general, it was emotional abandonment, more or less. And so she would always go and tell people, well, I'm like this because I've been treated a certain way, and Raim is very manipulative and you can't really trust her with anything. And so my moderators eventually questioned me about this, and I would go and I would share like our chat histories. So she would constantly throw in my face, "Oh, well, it's your fault that I'm like this. I'm going to kill myself," and like all this other stuff. And so tension was piling on me. A kind of a ridiculous rate. She was living in her friends' streams all the time, crying and being pissed and everything else. And instead of going and handling life, instead of like going and dealing with life, she would become terminally online all the time and just get drunk and slam pills. And she was always taking painkillers for some reason, and I never really understood why. She's like, "I'm in pain," and it's like, okay, you're in pain from what, hon? She would never have an answer. So the abuse had kind of climaxed throughout all of 2018. I was getting messages on my whispers from Twitch during cast from people that said that they were dating her and that they knew pretty much everything about her. So I'd asked them to describe her, and they knew about her personal tattoos and stuff, and her dog, and they just knew way too much about her life to really go and be just random passerbys. And so the pressure for this would literally go and kind of keep mounting. At this point, I had invested in a private investigator to go and look into things. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty much done with this. I need to know who the hell it is that I'm going and dating, more or less, and I did it very quietly. You have to register with Canada to go and get a private eye, and I went ahead and did. They asked me why I was doing it. I said, hey, I think I'm being lied to. They went ahead and they waved me through, and the investigation had begun. My track record with the RCMP is actually quite awful because she would constantly go and claim I'm going to kill myself. I would call the RCMP thinking that she was actually going to do it. They would go over there. I would frequently have female officers sent because she said she was afraid of men. A lot of the time they would call me back. My moderators would sit in on the call because my phone had this weird thing where I was using an LG V10 at the time, and if you're in a Discord call and then you took a phone call, it would inadvertently merge them together. Like, basically what would happen is everybody in Discord would be able to hear the phone call. And so we had sent a female officer over there to make sure that she was okay. The female officer had called me back, and I said, great, is she all right? Does she need to go to the hospital? And the female officer is like, yeah, she's fine. She's in high spirits. So I realized at this point she had become very good at throwing on faces. She would literally guilt trip me, lie to me, straight up gaslight me in some aspects. And so at this point I knew that I had to leave the relationship, but with her constantly saying she was going to go and kill herself, I did not want that on my conscience, more or less. I kind of sat down and I was like, no, I don't want to be the reason for this, but at the same time, I have to go. The people popping into my stream at the time saying that they were dating her, fucking her, things like that, kind of slowed down a little bit. We had started to make up one night. I had just wrapped up casting, and so she was all lovey-dovey and saying, hey, I'm glad that you're here. I love you. We can work this out. And so I had received a screenshot from somebody in my whispers, and it was an argument between her and him. And it was her screaming at him that I had sexually assaulted her. At the time, I was living 2,800 miles away. We had never met. This was not possible. I had brought it up to her. I had forwarded her the screenshot, and she was like, no, 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 that's how I feel. I'm sorry. And like, she had just straight up fucking panic mode that shit. And I was like, I'm going to forgive you one time for this. That's all you're getting, just once. Afterwards, things were not the same. I did not spend as much time around her. The relationship was more or less dying at that point. We spent a lot of time arguing. At this point, I had started to develop what's called reactive abuse. And what that means is I was being abused and gaslit for so long that I myself was starting to become abusive as a defense mechanism. So she would go on Twitter and post incredibly emotionally charged stuff that was very toxic. And I was reacting to it because I thought that it was a clear shot at me. And so this cycle would just kind of keep going, and it would kind of keep turning around, and it was just kind of churning in place, and it was just really, really gross. And so things weren't really getting any better. The private investigator had gotten back to me. I found out that she was never in a band. She's never traveled or gone on tour with a band. She typically she was drifting when she was younger from town to town. She was frequently out of work, homeless. She had her truck stolen a while back, and, there was a bunch of old posts around the internet because she uses the same username for everything. And she'd be like, oh, I'm homeless, I'm struggling, are there any friends out in, X, Y, and Z, because I don't want to give away the location or anything. So this was pretty much it. It was like me going and like staring it down straight in the face. She would lie to me all the time. She would make bold claims all the time. She said I was abusing her all the time. I would later find out that this is projection. She would go and just lie to people about me all the time, so her friends eventually had started to hate me. She tried this shit with my friends, and they were like, yeah, we know better. And so once she had figured out that they had known better and they presented her with proof of like all of her fuckery, she ran. So the relationship was about halfway past dead. Summertime had rolled around. She had just randomly disappeared. I kind of stopped caring at this point. And so my health was starting to tank really, really hard, like super hard. I was in the ER all the time. I had multiple organ failure. We didn't really know why. I found out later on, it was actually strangely enough, it was this year, I found out that I had a genetic mutation for the HLA 27B gene. And what that does is it makes it to where your body is incredibly susceptible to inflammation. And then I also have rheumatoid arthritis. And so, how this mutation affects rheumatoid arthritis is it goes from attacking your bones to attacking all of your soft tissues. In my case, it attacks all of my vasculars as well as my organs. And so this is why my body was in rough shape. The stress was causing flare after flare after flare. I had finally, my moderators had urged me to leave her. I had started attending therapy at the time, and I would take my texts and all of her social medias to the therapist, and they would be like, yeah, that is not healthy, hun. You can't be doing that. That's not realistic. This is gaslighting and projection. And so things with the things with the police would eventually reach a standstill, thank God. I had gotten to the point where the police had called me back over a suicide attempt she had, and they were like, dude, we can't manage your relationship anymore. They were mad with it, and I understand why they were mad with it. I officially had started to throw in the towel. So it wasn't really getting any better. I realized it was time for me to leave. My family was pissed with things because of the abuse. My mom had experienced abuse in a very similar fashion from her old love interest before she had gotten married to my dad like 27 years ago. So she was able to recognize this, and she was getting angry with Annie and saying, hey, this is not okay. My friends were very angry with this as well. You know, they were like, Rain, we don't like to see you suffer. She's lying all the time, dude. You know, you gotta do something. So September had rolled around, and I had started going public, essentially, with my abuse. I wasn't really doing well. My mental health was in the gutter. I had started suffering from psychosis from all the abuse, as well as I had become abusive myself. And so we were literally just kind of trading blows at that point. My therapist had flat out told me, you're going to need to go no contact at some point, because if you don't, they will smear you. And I said, nah, man, she's not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and break it off. October had rolled around. I had stopped casting at this point. I had so much documentation in my fucking whispers that it was insane. My friends were incredibly worried about me. They had started screenshotting her Twitter over all the crazy shit she was doing, and they were archiving it and just going, hey, you know, if anything happens, we have this. And so I was prepping to just remove her on everything at that point. I had started writing a paper about my experience with it, and I had plans to publish it because it's how I was coping at the time. My therapist is like, just write about the entire experience. And everything was blended together so damn badly that I had gaps in my memory. My therapist was concerned about how I was becoming reactively abusive. I was too, because it's out of character for me. Like, I can be an asshole, but for me to become abusive is very, very strange because I'm a very soft girl, essentially. So everything continued rolling downhill from August to September, then October. And so I had come out and I had openly admitted I hadn't released the paper yet. I was holding on to it, and I was like going through and rewriting sections of it for better wording and, you know, spelling, grammar, all that shit, because I like to write well. She had gone on a 3-month tirade on Twitter talking about suicide and how she was sick of everybody and sick of everything, and she had eventually had started to have a breakdown. October had rolled around, and I said, "Hey," Halloween had rolled around more specifically, and I said, "Hey, if you want to hang out, that's fine." She never showed up. Eventually, I wound up in the hospital. I had so much inflammation in my body that I had blocked a bile duct, and I had gone in with jaundice, and I didn't know what the hell was causing it. My parents had taken me in. I was already highly stressed. I was experiencing flare after flare, and so I tried to get hold of her, and I couldn't. I was waiting out in one of the waiting areas, and so I had popped on Twitch for a bit to kind of watch it to pass the time because the average ER trip in my area is like fucking 7 hours long, and I still had a lot of phone battery, and I was just popping in and out of casts, and I saw that she was in the cast of a streamer named Tech Skills, who was a guy that enabled her up until her dying breath. And so I went ahead and I popped into the cast and I said, "Hey, hon, I'm in the hospital. They're asking me for my ICE contacts, which is in case of emergency. Would you like to go and be on them, more or less?" And I was like, "Do you want to be there?" She had lost her shit, tried to accuse me of being another human being. She was like, "You have really big balls coming in here while I'm going and suffering with anxiety and bothering me." Like, she basically flipped it around, made it about her. And I'm literally like waiting in the waiting room, all fucked up from the neck up. My goddamn eyes were yellow and everything else, and we were just trying to figure out what the hell was going on with me. Staff was slammed at the time. And so I was literally sitting there, and she was just kind of going on this goddamn tirade, and she was trying to accuse me of being somebody else, and all this other shit. And I just kind of sat there, and I was like, I am so damn done with this shit. I shouldn't have to deal with a child. And so I was waiting for a while for her to suggest the idea that we, break up. I'd been waiting for a long while. I was pretty disengaged from her for the most part. Like, I was so drained by everything that I had literally gone and checked out. I had this huge amount of apathy that had been kind of growing inside me for a while. So she was like, I think that we should just see other people and go our separate ways." And I said, "You know what? That's fine. I can't do this." I had so much apathy pumping through me. There was just no tears. It was just like, "That's fine. Get the fuck out of here." Well, I didn't say that, but I was thinking it pretty loud. So I had surgery. They had to cut open the tube because it was blocked up from inflammation, and that was causing fluid to gather and solidify. So they had to cut it open, clean it out, and a couple days later they had discharged me from the surgical center to go home. So when I had arrived home, she was already on Twitter talking shit about me. The smear had already started. She was calling me a piece of shit. She was also calling me a guy. I am trans femme, and one of her favorite pastimes was literally to go and call me a guy if she was mad at me. If I called her a guy, it was like this huge atrocity, but if she was angry at me and wanted to punish me for whatever fucking reason, she would go and call me a guy. And everybody around me knew how bad this shit sucked. Like, they knew how much I hated that. And so I just kind of sat there, and she was going and talking shit about me on Twitter, and I didn't say anything initially. I was like, "You know what? That's fine. Let her be angry." People that I keep close to me, I don't have to really worry about this with. I'm not worried about random people on the internet and what they think of me. It's not like I have a giant reputation to offend. Or, sorry, offend. Defend. And so I went no contact. It started, the last message that I sent her was via the cell phone that she had at the time. And I had blatantly stated, "Hon, I think you need to take a step back. Things are really nuts. If you can get your mental health in order," because at that point I was constantly saying, "Hey, hon, let's work on your mental health. Let's get you checked into services." FYI, the mental health industry in Canada, fucking awful. 9-month wait minimum just to go see a goddamn therapist. It's fucking the worst. So I went ahead and I wasn't really overly concerned with the smear. I was like, it'll fizzle out, right? And so what wound up happening is the holidays came and went. November was great. I spent it with my family. We had Thanksgiving and stuff. I went over, spent time with my friends. They were incredibly happy that I was out of the relationship. Like, they were upset to see me sad and they didn't want to see me alone, but they were bad that I was out, or they were bad. They were glad that I was out of an abusive situation. So I said, okay. I high fived him, and we spent Thanksgiving together. The holidays rolled around. I had a very quiet holiday with my family. They understood that I was still recovering from like a lot of stuff, and I had started addressing my own mental health with my therapist because psychosis was spiraling out of control so hard with me that I had started to become like her in many ways. I was like, yeah, let's just go ahead and hallucinate a bunch of shit that didn't happen. And looking back on some of our messages, it's very clear that I was like out of my mind. And I'm able to do that all these years later because I've had like a lot of CBT and DBT, and like my therapist has done a very good job with me. Like, we're still on the journey. I'm still working through a ton of stuff, but we work very, very well together. She's very good with me. And so looking back on it now, it's very clear that I was like losing my goddamn mind, like all over the place. Like, I had started to hallucinate heavily, and I had picked up her lying habit and like all this other shit, and I wasn't really particularly proud of it, but I was like, okay, I need to own this and I need to go and work on myself. I found out later that I also have BPD from sexual assault, except I don't have the standardized BPD. I have what's called quiet BPD, where I have a tendency to implode and kill myself and deal with really harsh emotions instead of explode and damage everything around me. So the rest of the year more or less came and went. January was great. Around February and March, shit had started to light up. She was getting caught in a bunch of things. So she was starting to go and incorporate elements of my life and treat them as her own. So I'm a pretty big nerd. I do a lot of sound engineering, and I have a really I have a high love for it. Like, I love sound and I love cinema. I love gaming, but I love sound and cinema more. So she was going into various chats, losing her mind, and she was going and claiming that she knew people like Kurt Cobain and like Matthew Heafy, and she met Deep Purple in the 90s, but they were already broken up. And so this would go and cross over from cast to cast. People at the time were aware that something was wrong. I had many of my friends who would moderate in these casts. They would screenshot this shit and they'd be like, Rame, are you okay? And a lot of these people, I hadn't seen them in so long that they weren't really up to snuff on like me breaking it off with her and then just kind of going and taking time for me. So I would have to explain, yeah, we broke up last year. I am going completely no contact, straight up gray rock. Whatever happens, happens. And so she continued to lose her mind until it had reached a climax where she was going, and she had popped into a streamer named IRNZO. And she was like, everybody loves Zoe. Zoe's actually really good people, has her own set of mental health issues and problems and stuff, but she's actually really decent. She went in there, made a bunch of bold claims. All of that is covered in the second vid. And one of them was that she had to moderate for Elohim, and that she had to step down because of the stress. Elohim did not like this. The video that was made about it was rather insane. He had later posted to Twitter an email that one of the moderators for that stream had sent to him, asking if she's a rogue mod, because this guy was also modding for other people, and she was dotting from cast to cast, essentially sitting there saying, hey, I'm gonna be an abusive cunt, more or less, and also I mod for all these people. She also claimed to know like Lucky Misfit and stuff, who I believe is his community manager. I'm not sure if they are or not. Like, Lucky's never seemed like much of a bitch, she always treats people really well and stuff. So he had called her out for this, and the second smear had started. She was losing her goddamn mind on Twitter. And so she's like, I just got home from work and I'm doing this and doing that and like all this other stuff. And so at this time, I had, well, a little bit before, I had released my first attempt at writing a paper about the abuse that I had to go through. It was basically how I was getting closure. It was like my little gift to myself. And so at this point, I had her blocked on almost everything. Like I blocked her on BattleNet, blocked her on Xbox. Um, I had removed her as my editor on Twitch and as my mod, and I had blocked her on Twitch as well. You know, I was just kind of going through and just kind of setting myself up for recovery, but I had forgotten to block her on Twitter because I just don't really. At the time, I wasn't really thinking about Twitter too much. The breakup was still relatively fresh. I was trying to go and put myself together. So she had started making bold claims with Elohim and stuff. The man was trying to reach out to her in DMs via Discord, and she had blocked him. And he had come forth and he had said, "Hey, I tried reaching out before going public with this. She blocked me." At this point, she had started lying rather heavily, and she was like, well, first she was like, I never said any of this. And then people were like, yeah, you did. We have screenshots. And then when they brought up screenshots, the lie had changed to, oh, well, Rame had broken into my account and said all these super silly, stupid things, and, you know, that's not me. People were able to trace the IP address that was latched on to the messages back to her house. There are tools for that. So she later said that everybody's hurting me, and it was just kind of weird. When that didn't work, she had started trying to blackmail and threaten me. This had caught the eye of a bunch of my friends, and they were like, hey, dude, you need to look at this. This is what shit's looking like. So the entire Elohim's entire community at that point had started to call her out on the lies and everything else. They had started to call her out on the abuse because at the time I had written a small thing of text. It was like 3 pages long explaining everything that I had to deal with, and you know, that's how I was getting closure. So she was sitting there saying that I was a piece of shit and that I was a stupid motherfucker and that she was better than me and like all this other shit. And it really wasn't looking too good for her. You know, she was literally sitting there struggling, and everybody, like every time she lied, the community banded together and proved her wrong. She tried to say that I had broken into her account because I had knowledge of doing so. The year prior, we had gotten two-factor authentication set up for her on Twitch because she was worried about somebody breaking into her account and screwing with all the streams that she had moderated for. So I had set it up. You know, like I sat down one night and I said, okay, we're going to go ahead and get you set up with two-factor auth. And so basically, it sends a code to her phone every time she goes to log in. So I tried to stay hands off with it. And eventually I had to break my silence because she was like dragging me out into the public. She was like, I have evidence that this person is abusing me and everything else. And so I had finally decided to go public with it. I had blocked her entirely at this point, and I said, hey, listen, this relationship was bad. This is what I went through. I've never broken into anything of hers. She has a problem with lying. She has a problem with reality. It's not my problem anymore. I more or less just kind of washed my hands of this entire relationship. I've been no contact since last year. And so the crowd kind of railed against her a little bit. They found out that she was abusing a lot of casters. A lot of streamers were coming forward and they were like, hey, we're sorry that this person lied about you. This is also in all of our streams. She also treats people like shit in all of our streams. And it was, by the time everything was said and done, the last count that I checked, it was in the 70s. It was like either in like the late 60s, early 70s, I want to say, that people were just kind of coming forward and saying, hey, you know, this is definitely a thing. We've also witnessed this. So she had gone on a temper tantrum, tried to blackmail me. That didn't work. I didn't reply to it. Then she tried to threaten everybody. Then she was like, you know, I live a hard life and it's because of this piece of shit that I was dating and everything else. And While people understood that I was having mental health issues, a lot of them agreed that I was like a good human being. I was unconventional. I was very quirky, but they all agreed that I was a good human being. So I had sat there, I made my statement, and I just proceeded to stop paying attention to it past a certain point. She had friends that were like, oh, we believe you, and they would like go and they would kiss up, to this woman and stuff, and it was very, very strange. All of her friends were on board. The sleazier element that she was going and hanging out with was like, we believe you, it's okay, we know they're a piece of shit. And then when I had officially stopped paying attention to everything, I sat down and I said, okay, you know what, this is ridiculous. She was going and trying to gaslight everybody. And so what I had done is when the abuse had started, when I was attending therapy, I would screenshot certain things because she had a tendency to go and delete her tweets and her messages. I would screenshot certain things to take to my therapist, and we would deconstruct it, analyze it, and then try to navigate around it, more or less. And so she would go and call me a sleazy piece of shit and all this other crap, and then she would constantly refer to me as a guy as well. Even though at this point I'd already started medically transitioning and stuff and had started HRT and everything else. So I sat down and I had started writing a paper. In the second video, a lot of people ask, why are all these papers, or why are all these papers, why are all these folders named Paper A, Paper B, Paper C? I had sat down past a certain point because people had started questioning me. And I said, tell you what, we're going to go ahead and clear this up. You're not going to like it, but it is going to happen. I sat down, I wrote a 150-page document, 20 of those pages just being links to screenshots, and it had gone in detail about the entire relationship, just various things that happened, how her friends would behave, just everything. And it went into my mental health as well and all the fucked up shit that I was doing because I had to go and experience this. And so I took 3 weeks to go and write about 150 pages. I literally just went and I belted it out. I had an old laptop at the time, and I was like, right, we're going to do this. And I just went and just hammered it and hammered it and hammered it. And eventually the document was done. I set up a Google Drive. I loaded all of these into folders and stuff. That way, while they're reading the document, they could just click the link and see what the hell was going on. All of the other communities at this point that she had burned had started doing the same thing. They had started throwing together resources to say, hey, this is what this person does, this is how abusive and toxic she is, you cannot trust her with anything. And so this was pretty much what everybody was doing at the time. She had continued doing the smear, and it wasn't really getting any better. My friends would report in on it with screenshots occasionally. I kind of stopped logging into Twitter past a certain point. And so people were kind of going into screenshot heaven a little bit because they were like, yeah, look at how bad this shit is. Screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. I had finished composing the document. I had done 9 drafts of it, various spelling errors. I was abused so heavily at the time that my memory had gone straight to hell and I was misremembering some things. And so I would go back and I would be like, is that how it really was? And so with the paper that I had written about it, I had focused more on, I had focused more on backing things up with screenshots because I wanted to go and just do it right, essentially. I didn't care if I looked good or looked bad. A lot of people were like, talking about your mental health and, how you were breaking down and becoming abusive is not good. It's not a good look for you. And I said, I don't care. I'd rather be honest with it. So I had finished writing the paper. I had the links plugged in and I had posted it publicly. And she was still going and raging really hard at this time. I was starting to get phone calls all the time during the day. I'd pick it up and the line would just go dead. And then I was also, if I was in a stream of a friend of mine, I was also having people coming in and fucking going and harassing me and threatening me and telling me they were going to find me and kill me. And I knew that it most likely wasn't going to happen, but it was still like worth looking at because it was happening in such a large volume. Eventually, the private eye had kind of finished up everything. I had him on tap for over a year, and I asked for a folder of everything. He went ahead and he agreed to it. We had gathered up the screenshots, and I had taken it to the police, more or less. My local police are actually really, really nice. They do really good work. I don't have standard cops, I have sheriffs. And so I find that they behave better than inner city cops. Like, I don't have to worry about randomly getting shot because they behave in a more human fashion because we vote these fuckers into their positions. So they're not likely to do anything stupid anytime soon. They're not hired, they're voted for. So I had gone to the police, and the police at the time were like, hey, this isn't healthy. They had already been, at this point, they had already been at my house a couple of times because she was making claims that I had sexually assaulted her. Whenever the RCMP would go to her doorstep, the RCMP would call the SVPD. Then the SVPD would go to my house and ask, what the hell's happening? And I would have to explain this to them. So eventually I went to the SVPD. I had a thick ass folder and a thumb drive just full of a ton of shit, and they said, yeah, you're going to need a peace injunction. A digital one, because this isn't going to get any better. If you value your reputation, you will do it. And I said, okay. So I went ahead, and the stalking was still going on full tilt, and it wasn't really getting any better. So I just kind of said to myself, this is very, very rough. I don't really know how well I'm going to be able to go and manage this. I had seen a judge about it, and I explained my entire situation. I said, okay, all right, this is how this is. And so the judge was like, okay, well, we need you to have at least 3 pieces of proof saying, hey, you're being abused. I had proof in the 400s for some things, and then as far as screenshots, I had well over 300. I had texts, I had text logs, I had screenshots. I literally just had everything. I had the entire kitchen and the kitchen sink. So the judge was like, right, we're going to go ahead and grant that. I got a reduced rate on it because it was being done with cause. Like, normally a peace injunction where I'm at is, well, a digital peace injunction is about $180. I got mine for 20. And so they were like, okay, we're going to go ahead and enforce this. As soon as I had gotten the peace injunction, everything had stopped. And so life more or less went on at this point. The harassment had stopped. The phone calls had stopped. The life just went back to normal, more or less. I continued going forth with therapy and stuff. Like, I had literally kind of sat down and I was like, I need to work on myself. I'm damaged at this point. I now manage my BPD very well. I still suffer with psychosis and stuff. My therapist assures me that we are going to be going and working on it a fair bit. I'm better than what I was, but I still have more downtime than uptime. I'm better than what I was all those years ago, but I still struggle with it. So it was really just kind of a hell of a thing. Everything kind of came and went, and as time had gone on, I had tried to reconcile with a couple of I had tried to reconcile with a couple of her friends. It wasn't really happening because they weren't really honest human beings. I thought that after I'd gone and proved everything, that everything would kind of smoothen over and that I would be able to rebuild with these people. I had tried to reconcile with Zero Gravity a couple of times, but the excuse that I was getting, instead of just a standard "I'm sorry," it was, oh, I didn't know, or she wasn't like this, or like there was just never really a solid apology. There was never apologies either for going and trying to reach out to him while I was going through hell and being beaten through the floor, and then him just choosing to go and keep playing Destiny, more or less. I had reached out to him a couple of times because I was just going through hell, and he just decided that the game was more important. And it was like a couple of days, like the abuse at that point was like so damn bad that it was a couple of days before I had to be committed to a ward because everything was just shutting down and I was just losing it. So I had tried to reconcile with him a couple of times. It just never really happened. I just wasn't able to trust him after that. With him going and watching all of the abuse and his big thing being, well, I don't want to be involved, like it just really wasn't jiving well with me because my IRL friends had gotten involved. You know, these were people that quite literally were like, hey, what's going on with you is not great. We need to do something. But with him, he was more interested in covering his own ass. And so I didn't really appreciate that. You know, like I didn't like people telling me, hey, I'll be there for you, and then proceeding to not be there for me. So I eventually wound up letting him go because I was so pissed with him that I couldn't reconcile it. You know, because with me, when people are going through shit, I get involved, I step in, you know, I'm like, hey, we're putting an end to this. But with him, it was like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, it was excuse after excuse after excuse, and him constantly trying to cover his own ass, and it didn't work. With Zindane 91, he just kind of faded into the void. He lost all of his friends and stuff, and he just literally lives like a really sad life now. Like he has nothing. She wound up losing all of her mod positions, and then she also lost Sidecar Angel as a friend due to the abuse and the lies. She had lost the gentleman that she was dating at the time named Ben. She basically lost everybody because of this shit. And so I had also tried, after letting Zindane go, I had also tried to reconcile with Ghost Dog 2 about it because I always felt like, you know, he's a pretty cool dude. I tried to reconcile with it. He was like, well, it happens, and he had a very large amount of apathy behind it. And so I just didn't really care for it too much because he would enable a lot of her behavior, you know, by not calling her out about her lies and stuff. So eventually I said to myself, I can't trust this dude, and I just kind of moved on. Regarding Zilla, he was one of her ride or dies up until, well, forever. He knows that she lies, and he constantly stands up for her. It's very obnoxious. I had called him out on Twitter because he would act friendly to my face, but he would call me a douche if he thought that I wasn't looking, per se. And so I was like, you know, this is pretty typical for people like this. And so I wound up smacking him with a huge ass paper, just kind of saying, hey, dude, you need to get your shit together. But I don't really think I could ever expect anything out of somebody that brags about being a drug addict or an alcoholic. You know, like it just didn't really seem like a terribly intelligent thing. So everything more or less just kind of continued falling apart. The fallout was actually really awful. I had reached a point where anybody that I had knew that was also affiliated with her, I literally had busted out the saw and I had cut that entire tree branch off because I realized at this point that I couldn't really trust him with anything, like at all, you know. And she had other friends as well, and they'd be like, well, you abused her, and it's like, I was dealing with narcissistic abuse at that point, you know, and I was just like really struggling through it. And so they would get a heavily distorted version of things. And they would also make like other oddball claims like you're harassing her on Facebook and like all these other apps. But the thing is that I don't have an account on any service that is owned by Meta. No Instagram, no Facebook, no WhatsApp, none of this shit, you know. And it was just kind of like a hell of a thing, you know. So I had eventually gotten to the point where I was like, these people are so fucking brainwashed that I don't even think I can fix this. I had pretty much cut the entire fucking branch off the tree, and I was like, I can't save this, and I kind of moved on. She fell off the map after that. She had ran. She was like, oh, I can't lie to these people, they know better. And so she just kind of fell off the map, and you know, now she crops up from time to time and stuff. Every time they bust her in a lie, she crops up, and you know, it just doesn't really look too well for her. But the only people that really trust her these days are people that are new to casting and all this other stuff. So that's pretty much what my last relationship looked like for Abuse Awareness Week. You know, it was a lot to talk about. I'm missing a hell of a lot of detail out of it. Part of it is me not being able to remember it because my brain went through this lovely little repression phase trying to preserve itself, and then another good chunk of it, and why it's missing is because I literally lost a good chunk of it when I had my hard drive go up in smoke. And then I'm also presented with additional challenges, like I wouldn't be able to release text messages because those are considered private, and the peace injunction does not authorize me to do that, more or less. You know, like I have stipulations that I have to go and abide by. So that was pretty much everything from start to finish. You know, like I am missing chunks out of it, and some of it's private, some of it's memory loss, some of it's fucking hard drive failure. Like it's just a goddamn mess, you know. And but I wanted to go and say, hey, if you're being abused, reach out to the best of your ability. Reach out to people that you know actually matter, please. If you're going and starting to become abusive, like I did, check yourself in to go and get some mental health services if you can, or at least look for resources. A lot of states actually have resources for this. You know, like it's actually finally starting to happen. You don't really have to suffer through it. So this is it's been a hell of a journey. I'm kind of glad that I took it. I'm kind of embarrassed I took it. On one end, I'm embarrassed because, you know, I don't really like openly admitting that I've been abused. But on the other end, I'm kind of like, you know, I'm glad that I took the journey because now it's like I have that experience. And yes, while I do have a lot of damage from it, I can literally look and say, hey, you know, this is just how this was, you know? I can identify things now. And yes, while the lesson, sorry, that speech impediment, is incredibly harsh, I feel that it was one that needed to be happening in my life at that time because I was a lot younger. I was way more naive. I was still in my 20s at the time, and she was in her 30s. You know, so it was one of those things. So the other video is there's going to be a brief dark screen, and then the other video is going to go and start for the version of this that is shackled together. So for those that actually came out and stuff, I do greatly appreciate it. I know that this isn't my standard content. Normally you guys are used to long plays and photo comps and clips and like all the stuff that you would normally expect out of me, but I wanted to do something that was a little bit more personal. Enough people had been asking about it. I finally wanted to get around to doing something for Abuse Awareness Week. Like, I really kind of wanted to sit down and say, okay, now's the time to talk about it. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to give you guys all of it. It's just so much. There was just so much crap that happened in that 3-year, well, shit, after everything was said and done, almost 4-year stint of abuse. And so I'm pretty much going to call it here. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate your time and your energy. Thank you for hearing me. And as always, be good to yourselves and each other.